Before we get going, I want to thank speedrunner Worcester and Shiny Hunter the Supreme Arcanines for letting me use their footage. Now onto the video. Pokemon is full of numbers. Let's see how. We'll start off with actually encountering a Pokemon. You can encounter Pokemon basically everywhere in the games. In tall grass. In really tall grass. By fishing. By surfing on water. By fishing while surfing on water. And most notoriously, caves. While encounter rates aren't definitively known, the best fan estimates say that for every step you take, you have an 11% chance to encounter a Pokemon in most land areas like tall grass, a 6% chance in caves, and only a 2.2% chance while surfing because thank God. 11% for the vast majority of areas may seem like a really low encounter rate, but just think about how many individual steps you take in most Pokemon areas. All things considered, 11% actually seems like a pretty great encounter rate. In most areas, you've got anywhere from 2 to 6 Pokemon that you can encounter, with each Pokemon having its own encounter rate. In areas with 3 Pokemon, you'll usually have 2 that have high encounter rates. Then you'll have one that's considered the rare encounter of the area, with an encounter rate of 20% or lower. But then there are the nightmares known as Pokemon that have 1% encounter rates, the most notorious of which being Dragonair in the Fire Red and Leaf Green Safari Zone. Speaking of the Safari Zone, Pokemon encountered in that area can just escape the encounter on a whim.
Please, Rhyhorn. Please. 1, 2, 3. Oh my god, no. It fled.
Fans have actually disassembled the code of Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, figuring out the flee rates of Pokemon in the Safari Zone, and going even deeper into the mechanics of how this stuff works. I'll just be doing a quick summary, but if you're interested in learning more, I've linked to the complete document in the description below. Every Pokemon in the Safari Zone has a flee value. This determines how likely it is to flee the encounter on any given turn. The lowest of all Pokemon in the Fire Red and Leaf Green Safari Zone is Magikarp, with a flee value of 25, meaning it has a 10% chance to flee per turn. Multiple Pokemon share the top spot with flee values of 125, giving them a 45% chance to flee each turn. You can alter flee values in 2 ways, either by tossing food to the Pokemon or chucking a rock at it. Unsurprisingly, food makes them less likely to flee, while pelting them with rocks makes them more likely to flee. The most notorious of these Safari Zone Pokemon are Chansey and Dragonair, 2 of the Pokemon seen prior with flee values of 125. Combined with their low catch rates, 4.9% for Chansey and 8.1% for Dragonair, and their low encounter rates, Dragonair is always 1% while fishing in the Safari Zone, while Chansey's encounter rate in the Safari Zone caps at 4% and is even 1% in a handful of areas. These 2 can be complete nightmares to capture. You can alter your chance of encountering Pokemon in a bunch of different ways across the generations, such as by using repels, having one of your Pokemon use the move Sweet Scent, or just by tossing globs of honey on the ground. Other variables that may influence what Pokemon you encounter, or how often you encounter them, are the time of day, the in-game weather, and the time of year. Generation 4 data miners have even found that Diamond and Pearl alter encounter rates to be higher or lower on specific historic or culturally significant dates. For example, playing these games on Christmas Eve will increase the encounter rate by 5%, while playing them on Christmas will decrease the encounter rate by 5%. Now here's a fun fact about Pokemon encounters before we move on, paraphrased from Bulbapedia. In test versions of Pokemon Red and Green, encounter rates were so high that players would encounter wild Pokemon every 2 steps. Combined with the fact that trainers would battle the player every time you walked past them, regardless of whether or not they had already been defeated, this led to it taking beta testers 12 hours just to get through a single cave. Game Freak thankfully adjusted the wild encounter rate and fixed trainer battles before the game was released, making for a far more reasonable experience. Though personally, I would love to see speedrunners take on the test versions of those games. But what about the chance of the Pokemon you encounter being shiny? Every Pokemon has a set chance of being a different color from its standard look. Pokemon with these different looks are known as shiny Pokemon. For example, Espeon's shiny takes it from a light purple to a radioactive green. Shiny Pokemon were first introduced in Generation 2, when the Pokemon games moved from the black and white Game Boy to the in-color Game Boy Color. Generation 2 was also the only generation where a Pokemon's own stats determined if it was shiny or not. For a Pokemon to be shiny in Generation 2, it needs 10s in every DV but physical attack and HP. For physical attack, a shiny Pokemon is allowed to have DVs of either 2, 3, 6, 7, 10, 11, 14, or 15. The HP DV will be either 0 or 8 as it's influenced by the other 5 stats. Using stats to determine shininess also created some unobtainable shiny Pokemon due to technical oddities, like how there are only 2 unknown variants that are capable of being shiny in Generation 2, the letters I and V. Since Generation 3, a Pokemon's shininess has been determined through a calculation consisting of your trainer ID number, your secret ID number, and the Pokemon's personality value. That formula can result in any number from 0 to 65,535. In Generations 3 through 5, a Pokemon will be shiny if the resulting number is any number from 0 to 7, which gives you a 1 in 8,192 chance of encountering a shiny Pokemon. In Generation 6, that range was increased to allow for any number from 0 to 15, now giving you a 1 in 4,096 chance of encountering a shiny Pokemon. Generation 8 has a variation of shiny Pokemon that has square-shaped sparkles instead of the standard star-shaped sparkles, but it only occurs when the value generated is exactly 0. There are ways to increase your chance of either encountering or breeding a shiny Pokemon, but this script was already looking to be massive when I added this portion to it, and I don't feel like trying to explain the intricacies of shiny hunting across all the generations. Starting in Generation 5, certain Pokemon are shiny locked, meaning that it's impossible to get a shiny version of them. This exclusively affects a lot of in-game legendary Pokemon, where you can only capture one per save file. I don't understand why the Pokemon Company does this. They'll occasionally make events out of giving out previously unattainable shiny Pokemon, but all of those events are free. So what's actually gained from punishing shiny hunters in this respect? Now we can move on to actually catching Pokemon. Every Pokemon has its own individual catch rate, which determines how easy it would be to catch if you threw a standard Pokeball at it. A Pokemon's catch rate can be any number from 1 to 255. The higher the catch rate, the easier the Pokemon will be to catch. A Pokemon's catch rate is then factored into a larger formula known as total catch value, which also accounts for the Pokemon's remaining health, though you can't catch a Pokemon that's fainted, any status effects on the Pokemon, burn, sleep, poison, etc., and the type of Pokeball used. For generations that have them, total catch value also accounts for certain powers. Pass powers in Gen 5, O powers in Gen 6, and Rotom powers in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Here's the current generation formula for determining a total catch value. I say current because this formula has been modified in one way or another in every single generation of Pokemon. And while that may look like a lot of math, we are just getting started. Oddly enough, it doesn't take these conditions into consideration. The level difference between your Pokemon and the Pokemon that you're trying to catch. You'd think that a level 5 Pokemon would be more inclined to let itself be captured if it were battling a level 55 Pokemon than it would be if it were battling, say, a level 6 Pokemon. If the wild Pokemon stats have been altered through moves like Calm Mind or Growl, or the current weather on the battlefield. On to Pokeballs, the way we capture Pokemon in the first place. Now before we get into the meat of Pokeball numbers, did you know that it was actually possible to miss when throwing a Pokeball in Generation 1? Not just when it came to the ghosts in Pokemon Tower, no. I mean your Pokeball could actually miss completely when trying to capture higher level wild Pokemon. It's just one more thing to have to take into account. Now we can talk about how Pokeballs work when they don't miss. A Pokemon's catch rate is impacted by the type of Pokeball used. Thankfully, the math for most Pokeballs is pretty simple. Different Pokeballs increase or decrease your chance of catching a Pokemon. Yes, there are Pokeballs that actually lower your chance of catching certain Pokemon. Here are a few really basic examples. The standard Pokeball has a modifier of 1 times, meaning it has no impact, good or bad. A Great Ball has a modifier of 1.5 times. An Ultra Ball has a modifier of 2 times, meaning it doubles your chance of catching a Pokemon. Then there's the Master Ball, which with a modifier of 255 times, will never fail to capture a Pokemon, even in the programming nightmare that is the first generation of Pokemon games. The Lure Ball works with a 5 times modifier if used on a Pokemon encountered while fishing. That's one of the highest modifiers in all of Pokemon. The Dusk Ball works with a 3 times modifier if used in a cave or at night. The Quick Ball works with a 5 times modifier if used on the first turn of a battle. This Pokeball is amazing at just about any point in the game, even on legendaries. There are 2 Pokeballs that can actually lower your chance of catching a Pokemon. The first is fairly simple. The Beast Ball uses a 5 times modifier when used on Ultra Beasts, but only a 0.1 times modifier when used on any other kind of Pokemon. This makes it the only Pokeball with specific conditions that at no point uses a 1 times modifier. Then there's one Pokeball that spites all convention and uses addition instead of multiplication because why god why? Inconsistency aside, the formula for the Heavy Ball is actually pretty basic. When used, it checks the weight of the Pokemon you're trying to catch. Depending on that Pokemon's weight, the Heavy Ball will directly add or subtract a certain amount to or from that Pokemon's catch rate, completely independent of any other modifiers calculated in the total catch value. When it comes to Pokemon under 220 pounds, the Heavy Ball subtracts 20 points from their catch rate, making the capture more likely to fail. In some cases, it can even make certain Pokemon impossible to catch in a Heavy Ball, most famously seen with Beldum in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. But since legendary Pokemon tend to be pretty big, this Pokeball can be extremely helpful in capturing them. The Generation 2 remakes show the use of the Heavy Ball at its best, as there's a post-game event where the player can capture either Groudon or Kyogre. In Heart Gold, you'll get Groudon, in Soul Silver, you'll get Kyogre. In those games only, the Heavy Ball adds 40 points to the catch rate of any Pokemon that weighs at least 903 pounds. While Kyogre is only eligible for a 30-point boost as it weighs just 776 pounds, Groudon weighs in at an absurd 2,094.4 pounds. When Heart Gold and Soul Silver came out, Groudon was the heaviest Pokemon of all time, outweighing second place Altered Form Giratina by over 400 pounds. Even 10 years after the release of Heart Gold and Soul Silver, base form Groudon is still one of the heaviest Pokemon of all time, tied with Eternatus for 4th heaviest, while Primal Groudon is the 3rd heaviest Pokemon of all time, behind a Cosmoem Celesteela tie for 1st. Since Groudon's base catch rate is 3, a 40-point boost makes it only slightly more difficult to catch than a Bellossom, Vanillux, or Gyarados, just to name a few. Now on to levels. Levels are like a Pokemon's age. They range from level 1 to level 100. Pokemon increase in level by gaining experience points. Also rare candies, but we don't have time for that. Pokemon gain experience by either beating other Pokemon in battle or hanging out in the daycare while you run a marathon. Every Pokemon is in one of 6 experience growth groups, meaning different Pokemon require different amounts of experience to level up. The groups are as follows. There's fast and slow, there's medium fast and medium slow, and the last 2 are known as erratic and fluctuating. For whatever reason, the erratic group levels up the fastest, while the fluctuating group levels up the slowest. And while I feel apathetic toward all but 3 of the Pokemon in the erratic group, those being Zangoose, Milotic, and Armaldo, 3 of my favorite Pokemon are in the fluctuating group, Breloom, Hariyama, and my absolute favorite Pokemon of all time, Corphish. All Pokemon give you experience once defeated, but different Pokemon give different amounts of experience, while also taking the Pokemon's level into account. Because defeating a Volcarona should of course give you more experience than defeating a Seedot, and likewise, defeating a level 15 Seedot should give you more experience than defeating a level 5 Seedot. The game decides how much experience to give you after knocking out a Pokemon by taking that Pokemon's base experience yield, multiplying it by the Pokemon's level, and then dividing that number by 7. That's way simpler than I thought. For whatever reason, experience yield isn't standardized, which is to say that there are not experience yield groups that large amounts of Pokemon fall into. From what I can tell just scanning the Bulbapedia page, the only common experience yield I could find was 184. It's shared across all of the Evolutions, Cloyster, Lucario, Hippowdon, and Centiskorch. If yields aren't decided at random and this isn't just an odd coincidence, I would love to know what connects the Evolutions to a Frozen Oyster, one of the most popular Fursonas, a Sand Hippo, and a Flaming Centipede. Comment down below if you have any idea. But that's not all a Pokemon gives once you knock it out. Every Pokemon also gives out what are known as effort value points upon being defeated. These are far more understandable, most of the time. Base stage Pokemon give out 1 EV, first stage Pokemon give out 2 EVs, while second stage and legendary Pokemon give out 3 EVs. However, some oddities can occur in this fairly simple setup, Like how Dracovish gives out 2 EVs, while Butterfree gives out 3 EVs, even though Dracovish is clearly the more impressive Pokemon to defeat. Pokemon typically give out EVs for whichever stat of theirs is the strongest. For example, Raichu's best stat is its speed, so it naturally gives out 3 speed EVs when defeated. Some Pokemon give out EVs for multiple stats, like how Scrafty gives out 1 EV for physical defense and 1 EV for special defense. So you understand what experience points do, but what purpose do effort values serve? Think of them like learned skills in real life. For every 4 EVs earned in a particular stat, your Pokemon will see a 1 point total increase in that stat at level 100. For example, a Metagross with perfect IVs, we're getting there, and a neutral nature, we're also getting there, will have a speed stat of 176 if you just force-fed it rare candies from level 1 to level 100, since rare candies don't give any EVs. But if you had it defeat 2 Jolteons, gaining 4 speed EVs in total, then it would have a speed stat of 177 at level 100. In generations 3 and 4, the first 2 generations of EVs as we currently know them, you could not benefit from EV gains if your Pokemon was already at level 100, since the games required a Pokemon to level up to receive the stat gains. All Pokemon can gain a maximum of 510 total EVs, but you can only add 252 EVs to a single stat. Since 510 is not a multiple of 4, a fully EV Pokemon will always have 2 extra EVs that mean absolutely nothing to its stats. Fun fact about EV yields before we move on. Only 2 Pokemon give off EVs in both HP and another stat when defeated, those being Kyurem and Piloswine, who are both Ice types. This is odd because Ice is one of the worst defensive typings in all of Pokemon. Yet EVs aren't the only thing that affects a Pokemon's stats. There are 3 more things that contribute to your Pokemon stats looking the way they do when you look at them in-game. The first is a Pokemon's base stats, applying to the stats of HP, physical attack and physical defense, special attack and special defense, and lastly, speed. Base stats are hidden values and are the main influence of how high or low every stat of a Pokemon can be. Across generations, Pokemon have seen alterations to their base stats, like Raichu, who had a base speed of 100 in generations 1 through 5, but was boosted to a 110 base speed in generation 6 and onward. A commonly used term in competitive circles is base stat total, basically adding up all 6 of a Pokemon's base stats. Celebi has values of 100 in all 6 of its base stats, giving it a base stat total of 600. Most of the commonly used competitive Pokemon have a base stat total near or above 500, but that's not a hard rule. I've had a blast using Pokemon with lower base stat totals, most notably base form Sableye in a handful of doubles formats, with it only having a base stat total of 380, and Dugtrio only has a base stat total of 405, but remains a notable threat in Generation 3 and was even banned in Generation 4 competitive play recently. Now in Generation 1, there was no special attack or special defense stat. Instead, there was simply the all-encompassing special stat, which worked as both the special attack and special defense stat. This greatly helped certain Pokemon, most notably Alakazam. While Alakazam has always been a decent Pokemon, it was top of the class in Generation 1, thanks to its high speed and an unrelenting base 135 special stat. While Alakazam kept 135 as its base special attack stat, its special defense was dropped to a still solid 95 in later generations. But if it had kept its base 135 special defense, it would be matching Blissey and Mega Gardevoir in that stat, and would have a higher special defense than notable tank Tapu Fini. When Mega Evolutions were introduced in the 6th generation, every Pokemon that got one received a large boost to their base stats, but the only stat that was never altered during Mega Evolution was HP, given that it would be incredibly tricky to program around all of the variables that could impact the HP stat before Mega Evolution. Now on to a more complex element of Pokemon stats, that being IVs. Every competitive player knows both EVs and IVs very well. Whereas EVs stand for effort values, IVs stand for individual values. So if gaining EVs is comparable to learning a skill, what's the real-world comparison for IVs? Well, genetics. IVs are basically Pokemon DNA. You can't train, gain, or lose IVs like you can with EVs. Pokemon can have a maximum of 31 IVs in any base stat, and unlike how you're limited to only being able to put 252 EVs into a single stat, you can have 31 IVs in every single base stat at the same time. And unlike how it takes 4 EVs to make 1 point of difference in a Pokemon's stats, 1 IV is equal to 1 point of difference in any given stat. Lastly, a Pokemon's nature can alter its stats. Think of natures like a Pokemon's personality. Along with affecting a bunch of minigame elements in Pokemon, natures also provide a competitive trade-off. Well, most of the time. There are 25 possible natures, 5 of which do absolutely nothing. As for the 20 that mean something, each will boost one stat by 10%, while lowering another stat by that same 10%, though no nature increases or decreases a Pokemon's HP. Now it's time to get into the competitive realm, the original inspiration for this video. Firstly, let's just do a quick overview of how the topics that we have already covered come into play in a competitive setting. The type of Pokeball a Pokemon is in has no effect in battle, and is mostly used as another way for trainers to add a personal touch to their Pokemon. Shiny Pokemon are no better or worse than non-shiny Pokemon, since the color variations stopped being connected to stats in Generation 3. The level of a Pokemon usually doesn't matter in competitive battling, as odd as that might sound. Pokemon games will automatically level up or level down your Pokemon to level 50 when playing online, while simulators like Pokemon Showdown and Pokemon Online run all of their battles at level 100, but do allow players to change their Pokemon's levels if they want to. EVs, IVs, and natures are the backbone of competitive play. While the intricacies of EV spreads are too complicated for this video, IVs and natures are far easier to explain. So why would you ever want a Pokemon with IVs that aren't 31s across the board? Well, there are 3 scenarios where non-perfect IVs can really make a positive impact. The first is with the move Hidden Power, a move that can be any type in the game aside from Normal and Fairy. Its type is determined by a Pokemon's IVs. This can be used to give type coverage to Pokemon that don't learn any moves of a certain type naturally. For example, Tyranitar doesn't naturally learn any Grass-type moves, but with the right IVs, it can have Hidden Power Grass to help it deal with Swampert in Generation 3. The second is when it comes to the move Trick Room. Trick Room reverses speed order, making slower Pokemon move first. When using a Trick Room team, you want your Pokemon to be as slow as possible, so it's best that they have 0 speed IVs. The third reason is specific to special attackers and Pokemon that don't use any attacking moves. For these Pokemon, it is best to make sure that they have 0 IVs in their physical attack stat unless they're using a hidden power. This is done as a precautionary measure that limits how much damage the confusion status can inflict. When a Pokemon becomes confused, it has a 50% chance to make the move you told it to. The other 50% of the time, it hits itself and does damage. The amount of damage done when it hits itself in confusion is based on how high its physical attack stat is. So for Pokemon that don't need their physical attack stat, it's best to keep it as low as possible in the off chance that this comes into play. There is no condition that causes self-inflicted damage based on any other stat. Natures are much the same. If your Pokemon is only using physical attacks, you'd want to give it a nature that lowers its special attack since you won't need it. Now we can finally move on to talking about actual moves. But wait, we first have to tackle stat boosts, types, items, and abilities because the numbers just seemingly never end. Okay, stat boosts. These are pretty easy, but there is one little hitch. There is nothing that increases or decreases HP in the same way that other stats can be increased or decreased. With HP, you're dealing with damage taken and damage recovered, whereas the other stats basically have their own multiplication table. This should all make sense in a second. Along with physical attack, physical defense, special attack, special defense, and speed, Pokemon can also have their evasion and accuracy altered. The initial evasion value of any Pokemon is 100%, meaning moves used against it will act normally. Moves with 100% accuracy will always hit, while moves with 80% accuracy will hit 8 out of 10 times. There are moves and abilities that can alter each of these stats, making moves easier or harder to either hit or get hit by. There is no scenario where lowering your own accuracy is a good thing, and there is also no scenario where raising your own evasion is a bad thing. With that sidetrack trekked, how does stat boosts actually work? Here's how they work. There are 13 possible stages each of those 7 named stats can be in. 6 positive, 6 negative, and 1 neutral. At +6, a given stat is being multiplied by 4. At -6, a given stat is being multiplied by 0.25. Here's a quick graph that shows all of the stages and what their multiple is. Now we can move on to types. There are 18 Pokemon types. Every type can be used as a hidden power, except normal and fairy, as we previously mentioned. Every Pokemon is at least one type, while many are 2 types. There is no Pokemon that has 3 types, and there is only one move that is dual typed, that being Hawlucha's signature move, Flying Press, which is classified as both a flying type and a fighting type move. You'd think a dual type move would be really good, right? Well, it's actually quite worse than any of Hawlucha's commonly used single type options. Each type has strengths and weaknesses. The starter trios show this quite well. Fire type Pokemon are weak to water type attacks, water type Pokemon are weak to grass type attacks, and grass type Pokemon are weak to fire type attacks. If a single type Pokemon is hit by an attack it's weak to, the damage done to it will be multiplied by 2. Some types are even immune to other types, like how flying type Pokemon are immune to ground type attacks. The normal type is the only type that does not resist any type of attack, and is also the only type that is not super effective against any type of Pokemon. Normal types do have one immunity though, that being to ghost type attacks. When calculating damage for a dual type Pokemon, you factor in both of its types. If both types neither resist nor are weak to the attack's type, the damage done will be multiplied by 1. If one of their types is weak to an attack, while the other type is neutral, the attack's damage will be multiplied by 2. If one type resists the attack's type, while the other is neutral, the damage done will be multiplied by 0.5. If both types are weak to the attack's type, the damage will be multiplied by 4, while it will be multiplied by 0.25 if both types resist the attack's type. The most infamous example of this is Charizard, who is 4 times weak to rock type attacks due to both its fire and flying typings being weak to rock. That glaring weakness to one of the most common offensive types, combined with average stats, held Charizard back from being a top competitive threat until it got 2 different Mega Evolutions in Generation 6. Now on to items. Since Generation 2, every Pokemon has been able to hold one item at a time during battle. But until Generation 4, basically every Pokemon held leftovers in competitive play since there weren't any better options. So why would you want a Pokemon to hold an item? Because most items create an in-game effect that can be incredibly beneficial. For Pokemon that rely on their bulk, leftovers is still the go-to item. It recovers 1/16 of the Pokemon's HP at the end of every turn. That doesn't seem like much, but it can add up really quickly. You'll often see offensive Pokemon holding choice items, of which there are 3. The Choice Band, the Choice Scarf, and the Choice Specs. Each of them gives a 1.5 times boost to one stat, the trade-off being that they lock the user into only being able to use the first move they selected until they switch out of battle. There are some Pokemon that have items specific to them. The common ones to mention are Mega Stones, Marowak's Thick Club, and Soul Dew, an item that in previous generations made Latios and Latias complete monsters. But the item I want to mention is Chansey's Lucky Punch, a literal boxing glove on a spring. It's an item that would be incredible on a Pokemon with even decent offensive stats, making it weird that it's the signature item of Chansey, who was tied with its own pre-evolution Happiny for having the game's lowest physical attack stat, even below Magikarp and Togepi, and a bottom 15% special attack stat, below Trubbish and Pidove. So I must ask, why does this item even exist? Actually, here's a better question. Why isn't it Hitmonchan's signature item? I could see Hitmonchan being legitimately threatening with the perk this item offers. It wouldn't be top of the class by any means, but it would definitely be something you had to keep an eye out for. And lastly, let's talk about abilities. Every Pokemon has an ability, and most have the choice of multiple abilities, but each Pokemon can only have one ability at a time. Some abilities are crap, like Klutz, which makes it impossible for a Pokemon to hold an item, while other abilities are incredible, like Parental Bond, which made Mega Kangaskhan the unquestioned best Pokemon in VGC for 2 years. Then it was still incredible when Pokemon like Rayquaza and Groudon were allowed back into the VGCs after a 6-year hiatus. Parental Bond gave Mega Kangaskhan 2 hits per turn, 1 hit at full power from Kang, and 1 hit at half power from its baby. That damage stacks up so quickly. As with every aspect of Pokemon, there's something about abilities that just makes no sense. This time, it's that the Pokemon Company basically ruined 2 really good Pokemon by giving them terrible abilities that also happen to be the only abilities they could have. Regigigas is stuck with the ability Slow Start, which cuts its speed and physical attack in half for the first 5 turns of battle. That 5-turn counter then resets if you switch Regigigas out, which might be the most egregious part of all of this. So much can happen across 5 turns of a Pokemon battle, so no high-level player has ever used Regigigas when the stakes were high. Then there's Slacking. While Slacking's ability Truant doesn't cut its 2 most useful stats in half like Regi's does, the ability does cause Slacking to take an on-field timeout in the middle of the battle. Truant makes Slacking skip every other turn. You can't even use non-attacking moves like Protect to null the effects of Truant. You either switch Slacking out or do nothing. This ability isn't as bad as Slow Start, low bar, I know, because Slacking has the ability to do what amounts to a hit and run strategy. Come in for a turn, do massive damage, switch out to a bulkier Pokemon to take the hit, rinse and repeat. The common rebuttal to someone saying that these abilities are terrible is that, without them, these 2 Pokemon would be broken in a competitive sense. But when has the Pokemon Company ever shied away from making the most stupidly overpowered Pokemon imaginable? Regigigas and Slacking both have a base stat total of 670, which weren't even the highest base stat totals at the time of their introductions, nearly 20 years ago for Slacking and over 15 years ago for Regigigas. That's also not to forget that all of the Pokemon above them also have incredible abilities. Today, not only are there a lot of Pokemon that have base stat totals higher than 670, there are 5 Pokemon that outdo that number by at least 100 points, those being Primal Kyogre, Primal Groudon, Mega Rayquaza, and 2 different forms of Mega Mewtwo. So why still hinder Regigigas and Slacking? Now we can finally get to attacks! But even then, there's a caveat. Not all moves in Pokemon are attacks. By that, I mean that there are a lot of moves that don't do direct damage. Moves in Pokemon are split up into 3 categories: physical attacks, special attacks, and status moves. We'll be starting with actual attacking moves, which encompasses both physical attacks and special attacks. All attacks have 4 things: a type, a physical special designation, their accuracy, as in how likely they are to hit, and a base power, meaning how powerful the move is. Many attacks also have secondary effects, like how Earth Power has a 10% chance to lower the opponent's special defense. In generations 1 through 3, a move was designated as either physical or special based on its type. This led to some oddities, like how Bite and Crunch were special attacks, while Shadow Ball was a physical attack. This was changed in Generation 4 and onward, as moves are now individually designated as either physical or special, instead of a whole typing designation. This is a good explanation for why some movesets from Gens 1 through 3 look ridiculous by today's standards, like Gengar consistently running both Ice Punch and Fire Punch. The typing of the attack actually impacts its power when used by different Pokemon. If a Pokemon uses an attack that is the same type as it, the move will have its power multiplied by 1.5 times. For example, if a Fire-type Pokemon and a Dragon-type Pokemon both used Flamethrower, the Fire-type Pokemon's Flamethrower would do 50% more damage than the Dragon-type Pokemon's Flamethrower, since Flamethrower is a Fire-type attack. This is commonly known as Same Type Attack Boost, or by the acronym STAB. The stab boost is so impactful that you basically can't find a single commonly used attacking moveset that doesn't involve a stab move. Movesets that are mainly defensive in nature and have an attacking move tacked on don't count here because those sets don't care about being able to do a lot of damage, they just care about being able to do more than no damage. The latter three categories of accuracy, base power, and potential secondary effects partake in a balancing act of sorts. Even moves that don't do direct damage will work to balance their accuracy with how impactful their effect can be. All of these moves often take into consideration how many Pokemon can use the move. Meteor Mash and Dynamic Punch create a good show of how offensive moves can be balanced. While Meteor Mash would be really good if it had 100% accuracy, Dynamic Punch would cause a complete shift in how competitive battles are played. So what sets them apart? Well, Meteor Mash is a physical Steel-type move with 90 base power and 90% accuracy. On hit, it has a 20% chance of raising the user's physical attack by 1 stage. That's a really good example of a balanced move. High power with a risk-reward situation that's pretty fair. If Meteor Mash was 100% accurate, it would make fishing for that 20% chance easier, but it likely wouldn't outright break any competitive formats. Dynamic Punch is a physical fighting type attack with 100 base power and 50% accuracy. It has such low accuracy because, if it hits, it's guaranteed to leave the opposing Pokemon confused. Confusion creates a coin flip situation where there's a 50% chance that the confused Pokemon moves, and a 50% chance that it hits itself in confusion and gives the opponent a free turn. If Dynamic Punch had 100% accuracy, competitive formats would be built around how to stop it, which doesn't create a healthy competitive environment. But there is one scenario where Dynamic Punch is 100% accurate while also remaining competitively balanced. Machamp has the ability No Guard, which makes every move used by it and used against it 100% accurate regardless of the move's normal accuracy. While Golurk can also use this combination of Dynamic Punch and No Guard, it's Machamp that is best known for it. Machamp's ability to hit Dynamic Punch 100% of the time is balanced out by Machamp being slower than the majority of Pokemon, and the guarantee that any move used against it will also hit 100% of the time. It's a threat for sure, but it's also got some clear and exploitable weaknesses. Spore is a good example of a status move that has its high accuracy and high impact somewhat balanced out by how few Pokemon can learn it. Sleep can last for a handful of turns, and the sleep counter would even reset back to 0 in Generation 5 if a sleeping Pokemon switched out of battle. That's when the move was at its most deadly thanks to Breloom and Amoonguss being all over the place. Only 5 fully evolved Pokemon can learn Spore as of Generation 8, which allows the move to be fairly balanced. With all of these Pokemon being either Grass types or Smeargle, it's pretty easy to know when it's coming and prepare to work around it. This is also helped by Grass types being immune to Spore and other Grass type status moves as of Generation 6, along with items and field effects being introduced that allow other Pokemon to deal with Spore effectively. On the other hand, Thunder Wave is an electric type status move that paralyzes the target Pokemon, cutting its speed in half in Generation 7 and onward, but cutting the Pokemon's speed by 75% in all prior generations. On top of that, the paralysis status also has a 25% chance of not allowing the affected Pokemon to move on any given turn. It can be learned by a great number of non-electric type Pokemon, and for the longest time was seen as one of the most impactful moves across all competitive formats, but especially in doubles. Ray Rizzo permanently altered the landscape of VGC when he turned Thundurus, at the time seen as just a better offensive version of Zapdos, into a bulky monster that spread paralysis like a plague and was the game's premier disruptor for 4 non-consecutive seasons from 2011 to 2015. Thundurus would have seen 5 straight golden years had VGC 2014 allowed it, and was still a dangerous opponent in 2016 when the likes of Kyogre and Lugia were let loose for the first time in 6 years. All of this is to say that, at the highest levels of play, Thunderwave has been consistently impactful. It's not surprising then that Thunderwave has been noticeably nerfed in the years since. In Generation 7, not only was Thunderwave's accuracy cut from 100% to 90%, but paralysis now only cuts a Pokemon's speed in half instead of by 75%. It is still one of the best moves in the game, but it's not the world beater it used to be. But moves can't be used infinitely. Every move in the game has a certain amount of power points that determine how many times it can be used. For the life of me, I cannot find a pattern as to how many power points a move gets given. A good example comes in the form of the moves that set weather conditions, which will be explained in a bit. There are 4 moves that set weather conditions: Sunny Day, Rain Dance, Sandstorm, and Hail. Yet Sunny Day and Rain Dance only have 8 power points, while Sandstorm and Hail get 16. Going off how many effects each weather condition has, only Hail should get 16 because it's the weakest of the 4. Seriously, Hail used to be pathetically weak, and now it just barely scrapes decent in the hands of most players. While most battles don't rely on a war of power points, certain stall teams can punish players who throw out moves without much thought. There are 2 ways to get people to run through their power points: switching out your Pokemon, and using Pokemon with the ability Pressure. I'll speak on Pressure first. Pressure causes any move used against the Pokemon with this ability to use 2 power points instead of 1. Against powerful offensive attacks and incredibly useful support moves, Pressure can cause opponents to play around your Pokemon instead of with their own. Pokemon that commonly use Pressure as their ability include Deoxys Defense, Zapdos, and Dusclops, all of which can be quite defensive. Deoxys Defense and Dusclops are always defensive, while Zapdos has the stats to do basically whatever it wants, making it an extremely dangerous opponent in any format. It's hard to argue that any other Pokemon introduced in the first generation has been as competitively consistent as Zapdos. Then there's switching out your Pokemon. Switching your Pokemon out of battle doesn't cost any power points. A battle could go on for infinity if the players just kept switching their Pokemon out and did nothing else. Defensive teams can really punish impatient players by using switches to cause them to waste their power points. Even high-powered offensive teams can make use of this strategy, so long as they have a high variety of complementary types and make good use of immunities and resistances. 99% of players who employ this strategy use it as a temporary option, a way to gain the mental advantage by getting their opponent to start making more cautious plays. But even then, there are ways to prevent your opponent from switching out of battle, such as the abilities Shadow Tag and Arena Trap, and moves like Block. Pursuit is a base 40 power physical Dark type move, but it sees consistent competitive use because its power doubles if the opponent is trying to switch out, with Pursuit doing its damage before the opponent is allowed to switch. When a move runs out of power points, it can't be used. But what happens when all of a Pokemon's moves run out of power points during a battle? Then they have to use the move Struggle. Struggle is a base 50 power normal type attack, but it deals typeless damage, which allows it to hit ghost type Pokemon. It also deals 25% recoil damage to the user, making it the weakest move that gives recoil damage. No Pokemon can learn Struggle naturally, as it only exists so that you can still do something if you run out of all of your power points. But you can also cause a Pokemon to use Struggle under one decently common circumstance. This involves using the move Taunt on a Pokemon that doesn't have any attacking moves, like Skarmory in Generation 3. This forces Struggle because Taunt prevents the opposing Pokemon from using any non-attacking moves for a set number of turns. Since the Pokemon can't use its moves until the Taunt expires, its only options are to use Struggle or to switch out, which instantly undoes the Taunt. Now on to weather. Weather is a field condition that impacts battles. There are 4 main kinds of weather: sun, rain, hail, and sandstorm. Each has its own unique effects on battles. For example, rain boosts the power of water type moves by 50%, lowers the power of fire type moves by 50%, and activates various abilities like Swift Swim, which doubles the user's speed in rain. Great, now I've got to talk about priority. Priority is a bit of an odd concept for casual fans, and explaining it isn't much fun either. Basically, every move exists in its own speed tier, independent of the Pokemon's actual speed stat. The vast majority of moves have 0 priority, neither positive or negative. A handful of moves have positive priority, and a handful of moves have negative priority. I'll use Azumarill to best explain priority in-game. Let's say there are 2 Azumarill, one that's using Aqua Jet, a move with +1 priority, and one that's using Waterfall, a move with 0 priority. Even if the Azumarill with Waterfall is faster than the Azumarill with Aqua Jet, the Azumarill with Aqua Jet will go first because Aqua Jet is in a higher priority bracket than Waterfall. For every move that does damage, there's a chance of a critical hit. Critical hits amount to there being a 1 in 16 chance that any move ends up doing more damage than it would normally. In generations 1 through 5, the damage done would be doubled. In generation 6 and onward, the damage done is multiplied by 1.5. So if a Clefable had quadrupled its special defense and was then hit with a critical hit Hyper Voice, the damage calculation would ignore all of Clefable's special defense boosts, calculate the damage with its normal special defense stat, and then multiply that by 1.5. See how Hyper Voice nearly knocked out Clefable? Well, without the critical hit, Hyper Voice would be lucky to take 20% of its health. That's the end of the basic stuff. Now let's end this off with an incredibly common scenario that takes no effort to set up, but causes numerical havoc. Let me introduce all of you to one of my favorite moves, Rock Slide. Rock Slide is a 75 base power, physical rock type move with 90% accuracy and a 30% chance to cause the target to flinch, meaning they can't make a move during that turn. It's existed since Generation 1, but the insanity really starts around Generations 4 and 5, when double battles became more widely played thanks to the VGCs, the Pokemon Company's official competitive circuit. In doubles, certain moves hit both Pokemon, like Rock Slide. These are called spread moves, and they cause a handful of calculations to occur. The two most notable being that 1. The damage done by these moves is multiplied by 0.75 as a sort of trade-off for being able to hit multiple Pokemon with one move. And 2. All active chance values like accuracy, critical hits, and secondary effects are calculated individually across the target Pokemon. This basically means that Rock Slide hitting one of the opponent's Pokemon does not mean it will hit the other. Because Rock Slide has the deadly combination of imperfect accuracy and a high chance at its secondary effect occurring, this causes rage on both sides of the battlefield more often than not. I can't find the actual calculation for the life of me, but I remember someone did the math in regards to Rock Slide and doubles, taking into consideration its chance to miss, crit, or flinch one, both, or none of the opponent's Pokemon. Mind you, you can also crit and flinch on the same turn if the numbers roll that way. They found that a normal turn of Rock Slide and doubles, meaning that both of the opposing Pokemon are hit by Rock Slide and nothing else happens, only has something like an 8% chance of actually happening. If you see Rock Slide in doubles, something bad is going to happen to someone the vast majority of the time. There are just so many numbers being juggled by that one move. If you've gotten to this point in the video, you must enjoy listening to me talk. If that's the case, subscribe and hit that little bell icon so you can be notified when I post new videos. I've got 2 series that I'm planning on starting by next week, so I hope to see you there. I'm Seth Casso, this is the Video Games Variety Show, and I'll see you next time.